Hey, welcome to Scary Stories for a Rainy Night. If you have trouble sleeping or relaxing, you may have just found the cure. On this channel, I like to get the ads out of the way early, so there's only going to be a few towards the beginning of the video. Also, if you haven't checked out my podcast yet, I really think you'll like them. Scary Stories in Rain, Scary Stories in Fire, and Scary Stories After Dark. I'll leave the links to them in the description to this video. Also, some of you may know that for the last 18 months I've been producing a film, and it's going to be releasing in theaters on February 11th, 2026. It's called Gale Yellow Brick Road, and it's a dark reimagining of The Wizard of Oz. I'm going to show you the trailer right here. I hope you enjoy it.
Are you ready for today's session? You're safe. Do you believe that?
Yes. I don't want you to end up like her, Emily. Dorothy's been all but mute for nearly 20 years. Ankles, her heels, she bangs them together so much. But she says it's the only way she can keep her safe.
Her?
So tell me what you thought in the comments below. Like I said, this has been a work in progress for a long time, and the entire cast and crew have worked so hard to bring this to life. I can promise you, if you like horror films mixed with a little dark fantasy, this is not one you're going to want to miss, and it would mean the absolute world to have the support of my subscribers on YouTube. February 11th, 2026. I hope to see you at the theater. Last thing before we begin, I just want to say thank you so much for being here, and I really hope you enjoy the video. Now, let's begin. I am female, almost 38 years old, and would like to tell you about an experience that I had with my dog at the time. English is not my first language, so I apologize in advance for any mistakes. It's been about 11 years. It was autumn and night, and I decided to take a little walk around our housing estate with my dog, Sunny. Sunny is a black and big Labrador mix. She is really good and cuddly, but she hates other female dogs. She also has a strong protective instinct and always snarled when she doesn't know or doesn't like someone or something. There were no street lights inside the settlement. The only lighting was always at the house entrances. There was a small park with small playgrounds between the rows of houses, but as already mentioned, everything was in complete darkness. That's why Sunny was not to be seen, only to be heard now and then when she was chasing a rabbit into the bushes. Then it goes without saying that she wasn't on the leash. I only need this when other female dogs are nearby. Sunny listens to my word and always comes when I call her. So, while I strolled comfortably through the dark settlement and froze my ass, Sunny ran happily through the area and the bushes. I always only guessed where she was because I could not see her, only heard from time to time. At some point, I noticed a small shadow that was whizzing around me. When I looked more closely, I could see Sunny. She ran in large circles around me and the place where I was, and I thought she was chasing something. but the circles she drew grew smaller and smaller. She didn't make any noise, and I went on comfortably because I thought she was having her 5 minutes. That's what I would call when someone is going a little crazy. At some point, I didn't hear her anymore, but I went on knowing she would follow. Then I heard a sound. Footsteps. But they weren't my own. I was startled because they were so close behind me so suddenly. So I turned around, but couldn't see anything, thanks to the darkness. I got nervous and called out for Sunny, because it could have been someone with a dog. Sunny didn't come, and I panicked. She suddenly stood in front of me out of nowhere and began to growl as violently as she ever has before. My blood froze because it couldn't be a good thing. Then she started walking straight ahead, growling about 2 or 3 meters, stopped, and at that moment I recognized a figure completely in black. This person was shocked in front of Sunny and didn't move, and Sunny started barking like there was no tomorrow. The person slowly walked backward towards the lighted house entrances. Then I saw Sunny bare teeth in front of a young man wearing a hooded sweater, and probably started to experience the same fears as I did when I noticed him, because as close as he had sneaked up to me, he couldn't have had any good in mind. Since it was too dark, however, he could not see Sunny, and she must have surprised him at the right moment. Sunny started to jump, and at that moment the guy let out a scream, and you could hear something falling from his hand on the ground. He ran, and my dog followed. After I had released myself from my shock stiffness, I called out to Sunny as loud as I could, until after a short time, she was standing in front of me again, wagging her tail. I took her on the leash and then went back to where the guy had dropped something, and indeed, there was an arm-thick branch on the ground that he certainly didn't have with him to throw sticks. At home, it gradually dawned on me that Sunny did not have her 5 minutes when she circled me, but that she had long since noticed and kept an eye on this person to protect me. On the other hand, that was creepy, but also a relief. I was and still am so grateful for this great dog. At the time of these events, my brother, my father, and I, 16 years old at the time, are road tripping through Nevada and California as my graduation gift. It is the end of August, and after a long trip, coming from Las Vegas, cruising through Los Angeles, and heading north across California, we decided to stay in beautiful Santa Barbara for a few days. My father finds a motel not too far from the beach, and we are all in wonder as to the movie-like beauty of the city we are staying in. On the evening of our first night there, getting back to the motel shortly after feasting on greasy and savory pizza from Rusty's Pizza Parlor and walking along one of the most beautiful beaches in the USA, I start to get bored in the room after having watched the television with my father and my brother for about an hour. To change the scenery a bit, I decide to peek through our room window. As I kneel on the raspy, purple carpeted floor and draw the thick and heavy curtains outward, a sense of dread invades my whole being. I am startled by the thing I see right across the street, about 100 feet from my window. What I'm looking at is at odds with the beautiful picture-like frame created by the motel lobby entrance arch, delimiting it from my field of view. A beautiful shadow and light setting created by the streetlight beam on the pavement on the other side of the road reveals this man right under the streetlight. He is standing half in the light, half in the dark of the night, as if in the knowledge of the effect the lighting has on him. He looks like he is in his late 20s, early 30s, and stares right at me. His gaze like a laser beam I can feel all the way down to my kidneys. I can't see his crazy eyes from this distance, but I can feel them, and my subconscious picks up on the intent, which is not good. He seems to have waited for me to look at him for a long time, as if he knew it would happen. A few seconds after he is made aware of my awareness of his presence, he starts in a slow clockwork motion, sliding his index finger sideways across his throat, underneath his jaw, from left to right, over and over again. As the floor beneath me starts to sink and a taste of metal overwhelms the underside of my tongue, I close the curtains as quickly as if my life depends on it. I then turn my upper body away from the window, toward my father, and tell him what I just saw. He seems to shrug it off, and talking over the baseball game on TV, tells me to let it go. But I can feel, along with this calm vibe of carefreeness coming from him, a hint of uneasiness that I can pick up sharply. 30 seconds go by, and I stupidly kneel uncomfortably again on the motel carpet in front of the windowsill. After loudly swallowing for luck, against my best judgment, I draw the curtains out a second time. But this time, my hands stop at the width of my head, allowing into view just enough of the outside world to be able to grasp at what is happening outside of my seemingly safe motel room. There he is again, only this time, the man is standing 2/3 of the way to where he stood the first time I saw him. His facial traits are now darkened by the lack of the streetlight, but I can still feel his crazy gaze. He is under the motel lobby parking lot arch. There is not much light where he stands, but I can still perceive him doing his throat-slicing gesture. Now I'm starting to feel queasy and frightened. I close the curtains quickly once again and tell my dad again of the man's presence and his approaching of the room. I get on the bed, trying to concentrate on the TV to forget what I have just witnessed. I don't remember if my dad looks through the window to confirm what's happening. I remember him telling me to stop looking outside if what I see is scaring me, and that we are safe in the room, which is locked. After what seemed like a few minutes passing, I peek again for the last time. This time, the man is right in the parking lot, about 50 feet from our motel room, doing his gesture again. I start thinking that the man is probably mentally ill or something, and that I just have to stop looking out the window. A clever thing to do, I tell myself. The night goes on with that feeling that even if I'm probably safe inside our room, there is this disturbed man outside the room who is missing a few cogs that want nothing good from me. He could be leaning right on the window glass a few minutes from now if this keeps going. I try not to think about it, but sleep uneasily that night. The following morning, not wanting to go outside of the room, I decide to stay in with my brother while my father goes in the motel lobby to fetch orange juice, breakfast, and to speak to the motel clerk about the man outside. My father comes back after a few minutes with our breakfast and tells me that the clerk told him that the guy who frightened me the night before is known in the area for his mental illnesses. He's probably a schizophrenic, is what the guy said to my father. My dad then reassures me that the clerk told him that the man is not dangerous and that we are safe staying there for another couple of nights. Luckily, I never see the man again for the duration of our stay there. Fast forward a couple of years. My father and I are reminiscing about our trip to California, and especially about those days in Santa Barbara, when the mentally ill man threatening me with his finger outside of our motel room is mentioned in that conversation. My father, as if relieved from not having to keep this secret anymore, lets out that the morning after that dreadful night, the motel clerk had, in fact, told him to be careful with that man. He had told him that he was, in fact, dangerous. My dad just didn't want to scare us, telling us the truth. I thanked him for lying to me that morning, and we agreed that luckily, we never saw the man again during our stay there. So to preface this, I was young, maybe 18 or 19, and had no idea what we were getting into. So my father owns 3 businesses and was actively dating his business partner and was providing for her. She also made advances on me, which kinda creeped me out. She would buy us all food, and at first, I was grateful. But then I started becoming nervous as she wanted to be alone with me a lot. My father ended up getting married, but didn't tell her, and she got really upset at him and told me not to tell her. She came to my job and demanded to see my father, to which I told her he wasn't there. She screamed at me and said we would soon regret it. Due to the disturbing nature, I called the cops, and all they did was take my name and didn't actually look into it. So fast forward, I come home around 12 o'clock midnight, as I had just come from my second job, dead tired from school and work. I ate and crashed on my bed. It had to be at least 3 in the morning when I heard my door open. At first, I didn't move, because I assumed it was my calico cat, Misty, pawing at my door as she liked to sleep with me. When I groaned her name and she didn't answer, it struck me strange, but I wasn't worried until I felt a presence standing over me. I quickly woke up and discovered my father's ex in our house above me, crazy-eyed. She was screaming, saying how she would get her revenge on my father. I quickly rolled out of my bed, ran past her, and called the authorities. She openly tried to fight my father's wife and tried to stab my dad. The police came and arrested her on the spot. That was the scariest thing I have ever been through, and I'm glad I will never see her again. Now I sleep with a blade next to my bed and a taser. Please be careful, as you never know who might pay you a late night visit. So me, my father, and my brother moved into my house around 6 years ago. Cute house on the outside, but you could tell the inside was old and had its problems. Windows would shake when you slammed the front door, which you had to do. There was no heat, old carpets, doors hanging on by threads. Most people would pass the house up because of how poor the conditions were. But because my dad doesn't even lock his doors, safety was of little importance to him. Yeah, I know. Perfect setup to this story. A quarter of the backyard was actually a little motorcycle shop. The house used to be owned by the Hells Angels in the 80s, and you could tell that the shop housed planted weed and was the spot to sell drugs. I knew that many people probably knew of this house. It has rich history. I can't exactly pinpoint the first event, but I know that my quarter of the house freaked me out the most. Basically, when you're in the kitchen, you open a sliding door to a laundry room. Adjacent to that is a small room and then a bathroom. I want you to think long and hard about that setup. Hidden section of the house with a small room, immediate bathroom and laundry room. Gives me chills. Anyway, this was my quarter. Every night that I slept there, I was terrified. My room has 2 windows with no blinds, and every night I felt eyes watching me sleep. I am a natural hot body, so in the summer, my window is always open. One day, me and my brother were hanging out in my room after dark, and as clear as day, we heard someone burp outside my room. We both looked at each other like, "Did you just hear that?" And we both did. When I went to go look outside the window, I couldn't hear anything. If you're thinking of neighbors, don't waste your time. They live too far away to hear something like that so loud. Outside of my window, there is actually a crawl space under the house. Picture a little trap door, and if you pull off the piece of wood, you can easily shimmy under the house right outside my window. Night after night, I would hear footsteps outside, or small branches breaking with weight, though I never checked because my fear left me paralyzed. I would tell my dad, and he would say I'm just hearing ghosts or figments of my imagination. It was annoying, but it's my dad, so I know exactly how he is, and I should have known what to expect. I am really good with energy. I always have been. I can read a room even if my head was in my ass. Many times we would come home, and as soon as I opened the front door, I felt different energy. You only know what I mean if you know what I mean. Someone had been in the house, and I could feel it. They waltzed through here with no care of mine, and slipped out the back of God knows where. I would bellow out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" but no one would answer. I would run to every corner of the house and check for strangers, but never found one. I live in Canada. Everyone blazes here. I used to go outside to do it, but it just became unsafe. Before that happened, I would go smoke in the bike shop. I had a bong and bud and a lighter. One night, I thought I would go to bed, but leave the bong and bud in the shed, because why take it out if I'm just coming back tomorrow? The next day, I came back to my weed gone, and my bong used. You could tell as there was new resin on the bowl. This was my first confirmation that I wasn't actually going crazy, and that everything I had been hearing or feeling was real. I grabbed my stuff and ran in the house. I never smoked outside again. Some days I would have to go to the shed to grab something of mine, and some days I would look into the black abyss that was the shed and shudder as my bones turned ice cold. Whoever was in the shed at the time had horrible, horrible energy. Just looking into the shed made me feel sick and lightheaded. You couldn't pay me money to go inside during those moments. Any item I've ever had that I cherished, I have lost here. I have never lost so many things before, but I often joke around that this house has a mouth and it's always eating everything of importance. My dad thinks it's funny, but I know the truth. One night I got really drunk and dropped my diamond bracelet in my backyard in the snow. The next morning I realized it was gone. I was devastated, but knew it could only be outside. We waited for the snow to melt, but when we went outside to look for it, it was gone. I never found that bracelet, just like I have never found many of the other things I have lost here. Some days we will come home and the front door will be opened. Some days we will come home and the back door will be open. Some days I will come home and look for something I set down and will either never find it or find it in a different room. One day, I was standing in front of my front door, but I was facing the road, just observing. All of a sudden, I notice a man tinkering with the RV parked in our driveway. He doesn't notice me yet. I watch him pick at the aluminum exterior as if he were trying to rip the outside wall apart. He finally sees me and hides behind the RV. I call out, "Hey! Hey!" But he disappears into the laneway. I told my dad some guy was tinkering with the outside of the RV, and he basically tells me, "What you gonna do?" I don't know. I'm pretty numb to this situation. I have been begging my dad to start locking his doors, get cameras, or even just listen to what I'm trying to tell him. I have been gathering evidence and documenting situations for 6 years. You think the man would listen to me? Let me know if I'm just dumb or if he is an airhead and I have been right all along. Please let me know because this situation has made me a little insane in the membrane. One day, I come to my father crying. I tell him I saw shadows of a man pacing outside my window last night, near the window with the trapdoor and crawl space below it. He says, "What do you want me to do about it?" I said, "I don't know, anything. Just check the crawl space." He shines a flashlight around there. Keep in mind the crawl space loops around the house, so there could be someone around the loop and in the opposite side of the house, and my dad would never know because he never actually looked, just glanced. He puts the trapdoor back on and secures it, telling me, "You'll be fine, nothing will happen to you," and we go on with our day. Sometime later, obviously after I have forgotten about it, I was in the backyard. Something caught my eye, so I looked near the crawl space, and lo and behold, the trapdoor was ripped off and something shiny lay on the ground inside. I took a closer look, and believe it or not, dozens of tiny squares of burnt tinfoil lay on the ground. I have hung out with enough people to know exactly what that means. Now I know someone is smoking hard drugs directly below my window. I tell my dad and show him, and he tells me, "Oh, it could be anything." Of course. One day I was also standing outside my house, and a black Subaru Forester pulls up and calls me to the car, by name. They have a softball in their hands and asks me if I want the ball. They're trying to get me to grab it. I watch enough true crime to know they likely want to pull me into their vehicle. I stay where I am, and they speed off down the road and turn up the road adjacent to mine. They start doing loops. I tell my family about it, and my brother mentions he saw the same car go by earlier, twice, and that he noticed it because the back window was completely covered with duct tape. This went on for about a month. Cops were called, but they couldn't do anything because no crime was committed. Weeks go by, and my dad started to seem mad at me, but I could never pinpoint why. One time we had an argument, and out of the blue he asked me if I had been smoking meth. What? I am as hippy-dippy as you get. I guess he thought, with me always talking about someone being here that we don't know of, he assumed I was crazy and was actually doing drugs to become like that. I ask him why on earth he would think that, and he starts to lead me to the shed. He takes me to the very back corner of it, and what do you know? There's a cracked, straight tube glass pipe on the table. I can't believe that after everything that's happened, my dad would assume I am smoking crystal in the shed, rather than the obvious person or persons I have been noticing around here. Did I mention that my dad and brother hear sounds coming from the crawl space all the time, every night? Guess what they chalk it up to be? No, really, guess. Raccoons and pipes. What would you do? After 6 years of noticing someone squatting at your house, and 6 years of being told that you're crazy and nothing is actually happening, you start to get numb to new situations and also start to actually believe that you are crazy. I know I'm not, but still, I just don't know what to do anymore. It was probably only after my close call that my mind really started to run away with what could have happened were it not for my dog. I am a 26-year-old female. I live with my fiance, my 2 cats, and my dog, Rowan. Our house is literally less than a minute away from a huge farmer's field that is frequented by many dog walkers at all times of the day. Me and my significant other often take turns walking Rowan around the field throughout the day. It was only around 7:30 p.m., and it was still really bright and sunny. Rowan was letting me know it was time to go for a walk, so while my partner was tinkering in the garage, I grabbed his leash and headed to the field. Let me quickly tell you about Rowan. He is a 2-year-old Rottweiler who is very loving and playful, but would not hurt a fly. Not a bad bone in his body. He is also extremely well trained. We made sure to put the effort in, as he's a big dog breed with a bad rep, so wanted to make a point of not feeding stereotypes. I am very much of the opinion there's no bad dogs, just bad owners. Unfortunately, we have had some run-ins with some not-so-good dog owners, so Rowan gets a little nervous when meeting new dogs and people, but we're working on it. Back to the story. We're walking around the farmer's field. Rowan is off sniffing and peeing on every blade of grass in sight. I always keep an eye out for other walkers anyway, due to Rowan being a little nervous, and I clocked a guy on his own walking down the path towards me, fairly far away. At first I thought nothing of it, as plenty of people walk this route without dogs. We were just coming out of lockdown in the UK. As the guy got closer, I noticed he was in a full tracksuit with the hood up, which was odd, as it was like 23 degrees, so shorts and t-shirt weather. He then took a small path off the field leading through some bushes. It was a public-made shortcut rather than an official public footpath, but it was well enough used, so I kept walking, thinking nothing of it. At about 15 meters away from the path he took, Rowan shot back to my side immediately, dropping the mouthful of dirt he had been pretending not to eat. I petted him and noticed he was standing super alert, staring at the path entrance. When I looked up, I caught a glimpse of the man peeking around the edge of the bushes that concealed the entrance. I stopped dead in my tracks, and Rowan's fur was stood on end as he positioned himself in front of me. It took me a second to realize that this man had been watching and waiting in the bushes for me to approach. My current route would have meant I'd be walking right by the path's opening. My stomach dropped as I realized we were the only ones around on that field. I had this weird moment where I was almost trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. But then, the guy whistled. Not a wolf whistle, but as if to try and get my dog to come to him. Rowan was having none of it though, and I definitely took that as my cue to trust my stranger danger instincts. I immediately turned and sped walked back the way we came, simultaneously pulling my phone out and dialing my partner's number. I ended up having to clip on Rowan's leash to get him to walk with me, and he was not taking his eyes away from the path. He was even growling a little, which was so out of character and put me on edge even more. I glanced back and the man had edged slightly out of the bushes, watching me walk away. My partner answered the phone after a few rings. I was only halfway through stammering out the story, and he was already sprinting up to the field to meet me, telling me to stay on the phone but keep an eye on the man. The man in the tracksuit now fully came out of the bushes and just stood staring at me, walking away. I dared a quick look away from him towards the entrance to the field to see my fiancée jogging towards me. He was relieved I was okay, but was also immediately pointing and shouting, "Is that him?" Clearly furious at what this man might have had in mind, had Rowan not picked up on him hiding in the bushes. I eventually convinced my fiancé not to confront him, as he was still stood staring, almost taunting us. You never know what people might be capable of, or have concealed. We came off the field and took Rowan on a different walk, which he was more than happy about. I have never been so proud of Rowan for stepping up and protecting me. Safe to say, he got plenty of treats and fussing when we got home. Several years ago, I was maybe 19 or 20. We lived in the state's capital. Some family friends were coming to visit us during that summer, and my mom wanted to cook a particular dish for them. This dish is best served the next day, as the flavors have time to develop. However, we needed chorizo sausage to make the dish, something my mom forgot about until 7 p.m. that night. As this was in the Midwest, chorizo was hard to come by, so a quick Google search revealed a small butcher shop close to our state capitol building. Mom called and they said they had chorizo. Dad volunteered to go get it, and I agreed to go along because I was bored. We got into our nice Cadillac Escalade. This is important to note. Plugged in the directions into our GPS and drove down. While we were maybe 100 yards away from our state's capitol building, which is actually pretty nice, the neighborhood this butcher shop was in was not. Street lights were out. Windows were dark. Houses had peeling paint. Some were boarded up and there were no cars in sight or anyone else around, not even walking their dogs. Something about this place gave me a weird vibe, and I mentioned to my dad that we should get out of there. But we had a mission, and good luck trying to convince my dad to change his mind about something. We go into this butcher shop, and I don't know how in the world they managed to run without a visit from the health inspector, but holy cow, it was bad. It was hot and sticky inside, and I didn't hear any humming from the display cases, meaning the cooling elements weren't working. Inside the grimly display case are pork trotters, pig ears, pork belly, etc., and flies were buzzing. The floors hadn't been mopped or even swept in God knows how long. How do I know this? Because we are leaving shoe imprints, and our shoe imprints were the only ones there. As I pretended to busy myself by browsing the shelves, in reality I was scanning the store and watching the exit for trouble because I did not feel right being there. Dad asked the husband and wife manning the counter about the chorizo, to which they responded that they had just sold out of it, but they had plenty of fresh ingredients to make our own for the right price. As my dad was trying to get his way out of their haggling and asking for directions for the closest grocery store, I noticed movement outside the smudged and smeared glass door. There were 4 burly-looking shadows outside, close to our car, which wasn't the only car out there, but a beautiful Escalade with all the bells, whistles, and had just been detailed. In other words, we were a giant bullseye. Thinking fast, I pretended to look at my phone. "Hey, Dad, Mom asked Louisa, and she had plenty of chorizo," I said, a bit more cheerily than I intended. Before Dad could ask what the heck was going on, I grabbed his arm and tugged on him. After a quick thank you, we got out of there. Fortunately, the burly shapes were gone. My knees were like jello, wobbling, and I was still on the adrenaline high. Dad was looking at me, confused. "Hey, we don't even know a Louisa," he said as he unlocked the car door. "I know. I just wanted to get out of there because I had a bad feeling," I admitted as we both got in, locked the doors, and turned on the ignition. The car's headlights turned on, and not even 10 feet away were the 4 burly shapes. They were just standing there. They were 4 men, middle-aged, dressed in jeans, t-shirts, and caps. I noticed one of them was holding a crowbar, and they started walking towards us. I screamed, "Dad, get out of here!" He didn't need to be told twice. Dad gunned it, and the Escalade, which is built for not only beauty, but speed, accelerated. The men jumped out of the way, and we took off down the road. We didn't stop until we were home. Mom was more glad we were okay than about the chorizo, especially when she learned what happened. Fortunately, we were able to find some the next day at a reputable supermarket that specialized in Latino food. Obviously, I'm so glad nothing happened, but I will always wonder what those men truly wanted. Just our car or something else. In a summer between my years in college, I moved in with my old high school friends. They had a place close to their campus and college party district in our hometown. I attended school in a different city and need a place to stay while I worked over the summer. One roommate was going abroad, so more or less I was subletting. The house they lived in was an older duplex in a corner lot. We lived in the bottom floor, and the top floor was always vacant. The house would have been a prime frat house in its heyday. It had a large porch on one side, large enough for couches and coffee tables. Could easily host 15 people on the porch alone. We spent many summer days and nights on that porch, day drinking and playing music. It wasn't uncommon for us to exchange pleasantries, people walking by on the sidewalk, less than 10 feet from the porch. Most times, people going to party would come around the corner and walk down our street to go to the bars and clubs. Friday and Saturday nights, the crowds would start around 8 p.m., going one direction. Then, the traffic would reverse around 12 a.m. Mostly college-aged crowd with the occasional transient bum or tweaker. Sometimes, random people would ask to come up and chill for a minute. One evening in particular, a man happened to walk by. I saw him come around the corner. He was older than the average college crowd, late 40s or early 50s. He sees me on the porch and I wave and say hello. He continues along the sidewalk in front of the porch. When he is closer, I can tell that he looks weathered. His clothes look worn and old, hair a mess, beard and somewhat dirty, like he had been working outside. He pauses for a minute. I can't remember specifically why. I think he commented on the porch or the weather or something. I do remember that he asked for directions, like is this the way he wants to go? I tell him he is on the right track. He makes a comment about having friends in the area, then just continues on his way. I don't think any more about it. It was a low-key night, mid-summer, just one of those dog days. I think my buddy and I had a few beers, then decided to call it a night early, probably around 10 or 11 p.m., which was early for us. So you understand the layout. My room is on the porch side of the house. It shares a wall with the front door and a window to the porch, with a wall to divide the bedroom from the main room. My friend's room is all the way at the back of the house, a good 30 feet from the front door. I dozed off easily, but was abruptly awakened by a slamming sound. At first I thought my friend was up having a smoke, and maybe slammed the door mistakenly. Before I could make sense of it, I realized it was a violent knocking on the door, like SWAT team style knocking. Still being in a daze, I am like, what the hell is going on? As the third round of knocks shake the wall, I peek from behind the curtain in my room out to the porch and can see the same guy from earlier beating on the door. He seems out of it, uneasy on his feet and obviously stirred up about something. He starts yelling to me to let him in. Nope. I dropped the curtain and reached for my piece because they are past the point of having a conversation, and I'm feeling like the door may not hold. I thought to myself, I don't have time to call the cops, because if this guy comes through the door, my room is the first stop. I go out to the living room about 10 feet back from the door as the fourth barrage begins. He is telling more now. Sounds like he is asking someone to open the door by name. This time I responded with, "You got the wrong house," thinking that maybe will enrage him more or help him get a clue. The banging stops momentarily, like a decision is being made. I hear shuffling but can't tell if he is leaving or just moving around. Suddenly, one more loud burst of knocking, so I give him the same response, this time fully prepared to defend myself if the door swings open. It doesn't. Then silence. Then a few seconds of nothing. Then more silence. Apparently, that was his last effort. I went back to the window. He was gone. Or at least I couldn't see him. Don't think I slept that night, thinking it might just be the first of the night. Fortunately, that was it. I talked to my friend in the morning. He was completely unaware. He said he thought he heard something, but nothing alarming. Goes without saying, lock your doors and always be prepared. When I was in my early 20s and living in Chicago, I wasn't making much money. When I found this apartment, it was too good to be true. The top floor of a duplex with 6 rooms for $775 a month. The agent who showed me the apartment stressed to me that the landlords were very religious. I didn't have a problem with that, even if it did sound a little ominous. The landlords were an elderly couple that lived downstairs. They seemed okay at first. When I saw them in the yard, they would smile at me. They took good care of the house. When they saw I was having my boyfriend over, things started to get really weird. One day I was in my office writing. I hear a knock at the door. I open it, and it's the old lady from downstairs. Before I can say hello, she says, "Have you ever gotten an abortion?" I shut the door in her face. No thanks. This was a colossal mistake. The house was laid out kind of weird. There was a door at the bottom of a flight of stairs that I thought led to a communal laundry room, but after accidentally opening it once, I discovered it led directly into my landlord's living room. I, unfortunately, learned this the hard way. I was in my kitchen cooking. My boyfriend was at work, and I was by myself when I heard what sounded like the click of a door. "Okay," I said out loud. What the hell was that? I didn't really make the connection that it could have been the door that led into their living room. I walk into the hallway and look around. I don't see anyone at the end of the hallway. I poke my head into all the rooms. Nobody there. Then I look down the staircase leading to their house, and the neighbor lady is standing there, staring me down. I screamed. She flinched and stepped back into her apartment and swung the door shut. After that, every time I left the house, I would come back and something would have been moved. A window would be shut. Once, the shower was dripping and my towel was damp. I couldn't lock the door since it was technically a door to their house. They were the only ones with the key. The knocking got so frequent, 3 or 4 times a day, that me and my boyfriend propped up an old mattress so we wouldn't have to hear it while we slept. The second to last straw was when I opened the door for work, and the stairs were gone. I physically could not leave my house because there were no stairs. They had been dismantled and were sitting on their porch. I called them repeatedly, but they didn't answer. Finally, their son came out of the house and explained that they were remodeling their porch. He told me I had to cut through their apartment downstairs. I descended the stairs and opened the door, and they were both sitting at their filthy kitchen table, staring at me. The phone was in its cradle. They must have heard it ringing. They kept staring at me with this blank look on their faces. I crossed their kitchen and left out their back door. A few days later, I came home from my job and noticed the bathroom floor was almost completely flooded, like somebody left a faucet on or the shower on. The old woman, seeing that I had come home, came upstairs and knocked, screaming at me that I had flooded the bathroom and that her son had to come fix it. I was so run down at this point that I just told her it was okay. Her son came by a few hours later. He was completely drunk. I open the door and tell him that I need an hour or so before he comes, and he picks something up and swings it at me. It was a massive wrench. I somehow duck out of the way, and he stumbles over. I book it down the newly repaired stairs as quickly as possible and call the police. They come by and take down a complaint, but claim since there was no physical contact, they can't do anything, which seemed odd to me. I learned later that the old couple has a daughter on the force. In the middle of the night, me, my boyfriend, and several of his friends packed all of our stuff into a Chevy Astro. We lived in hotels and the van for a month until we found another house. They never attempted to contact us again. This happened about 5 years ago now, but it was such a traumatic experience for me that I remember most of the events in pretty vivid detail. I have PTSD from the experience still that sometimes demobilizes me when I'm home alone, and I only feel safe in a place when I know I have something to defend myself with in every room. I lived in a small, ground floor basement apartment building, briefly in college with my now ex-boyfriend, Ryan, and another roommate, Alice, who we didn't know previous to moving in. This small apartment building faced another identical one, and the drive sloped down by quite a bit to the side of our building. So the front of our basement apartment was mostly below ground level, but the back was fully exposed and had a back door that opened into a wooded area that you could get to from the parking lot. The front door was inside the building, and you had to go down a flight of stairs from the main front entrance to get to it. We had been living there for about a month when I was doing laundry one stormy night, and strange things started to happen. The laundry room was right across the hall, and I had walked back across to grab more quarters and say something to my boyfriend quickly, so I hadn't closed the front door all the way. I was talking to my boyfriend when I saw the door move a little bit. I thought it was a change in the air pressure from the front door to the building being opened initially, so I kept talking, but kept an eye on it. Then, I watched as it opened by a few more inches. I told my boyfriend to come over, and he rounded the corner just in time to see it open by several more inches. "I see it," he said, and ran out the door. Our front door was at the end of a pretty long hallway, and the door was hung in such a way that I couldn't see who had been standing on the other side of it. Ryan came back and said that he had chased after them just in time to see white tennis shoes and a pale but really long hairy leg going up the stairs, and that it looked like they had gone out the front door of the building. But it was dark and pouring out, and he couldn't find anyone. We kind of just shook it off because we lived near campus and thought some idiot had stumbled in drunk and tried to come in the wrong apartment. 2 or 3 weeks later, it stormed really badly again. This was a really janky college apartment that only had a window AC in the living room, and it was September and still really hot. So we had to sleep that night with the bedroom doors open to get some airflow from the AC. The next morning, I walked into the bathroom to take a shower and saw a bunch of dead bugs in the bathtub, as well as mud and what looked like a footprint. I was mad and thought that Alice had opened the little window in the shower the night before when it was raining, and that the rain had just swept some dead bugs in off the window track. I was noticing at the point that she did some weird voyeuristic things, like opening the window in the shower while she was showering. There was a line of parking spots right outside, and you could see down right into the shower from a parked car, with the window open, and leaving her blinds open at night while she had guys in her room. Again, you could see right inside. So I made a mental note to mention it to her later. It wasn't until a few days later that Ryan and I were walking down the slope out front and noticed a twisted window screen lying on the grass right outside the bathroom window. I picked it up and my heart absolutely sank. It looked like it had been ripped out of the window. I walked inside and asked Alice about the mud in the bathtub and the footprints and the dead bugs, and she said she hadn't opened the window recently. I suddenly put two and two together and realized that someone had pulled the screen out of the window and come in that night, brushing dead bugs off the window track and leaving muddy footprints in the bathtub, and that we had been sleeping with the door open that night. We looked all around the apartment and couldn't find anything that might have been stolen. Our TV and laptops had been sitting right out in the living room, and they didn't look like they had even been touched. We called the police, they came and took a statement and left. But since nothing had been taken, there wasn't much they could do. I could tell at the time they thought we were overreacting and didn't really believe that anyone had come inside. My now ex was an absolute idiot, and against my urging, put a sign up on the bathroom window that said something along the lines of, "We know we were broken into and are on alert," and was written on a bright pink note card. We had those old windows in the apartment that slid open horizontally, but didn't really lock properly, so I took a heavy stick I had found out in the woods and jammed it in place to stop the window from opening. One night we were up late playing a board game, and I went to use the bathroom, saw the shadow of the stupid note on the opaque window, and went back. Alice went to use the bathroom a few minutes later and came back hysterical because the note had been ripped off. We called the police and they stopped by to take a statement and said they were going to look around the neighborhood. Since the first note had worked so well, Ryan, for reasons I can't fathom, decided to put another sign up, this time on the bright green note card. He opened the window, yelled, and slammed it shut again. I had just had time to catch a glimpse of something white right outside the window, next to his face. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack because I thought it had been a face at the window, but Ryan said it had been a pair of white shoes, and that they looked the same as the ones on the person who tried to come in before. He still put the sign up, against my pleading. I called the police back, and they were back within a couple of minutes, looking annoyed. Apparently, they had been just about to pull out of the parking lot when the call came back in from the dispatcher, and they said they hadn't seen anyone out in the parking lot. I explained to them that there was enough of a slope next to the front windows that, if something was standing there, and there were cars parked in the parking spots, you wouldn't be able to see them from the street. One of them told us that he was going to wait around for a bit in his car to see if he could see any suspicious activity. It was a while later when he came back and told us that he hadn't seen anything, and that he had even checked the hoods of the cars outside for warmth to see if any of them had been running recently. I asked him if he had seen anything else like this recently, and when he said no, asked him what he thought this person wanted. He said he did believe us because he could see how shaken we all were, and that maybe this person was just bored and messing with us. I kept reiterating the length of time between these events and the fact that nothing had been stolen out of the apartment when they had more than likely entered the other night. He then admitted that the person could be mentally ill and had possibly developed an unhealthy obsession with one of us. He suggested some ways to improve our home security and left for the night. After he had left, we decided to stay up. We spent the night being pretty quiet, listening for sounds. I want to say it was maybe an hour later. Ryan looked over at the back door, and I heard an, "Oh no," and I saw a piece of something bright green poking through the back door. He opened the door slightly and pulled through the green note card that had somehow been stuffed through the space between the door and the frame. We had been sitting quietly the whole time and hadn't heard the screen door open. He looked outside and didn't see anyone. I became convinced at that point that this person was having fun messing with us, and I was pretty terrified by the fact that they hadn't been scared of the police's presence. I strongly suspected at that point that the pink note card sign was going to make its way back to us, and I wanted to catch them in the act. So we all positioned ourselves looking at the different directions and staked the exits and the bathroom window out. It must have been another hour that passed before we finally got sick of sitting there and stood up and started talking about going to bed because it was almost dawn by that point. This conversation maybe went on for 5 to 10 minutes, and when I looked back at the front door, which I had been watching, the pink note card was laying on the floor, slipped under the door. Things escalated by quite a bit in my remaining time there. For the next month, we'd wake up to the sound of the windows getting pounded on, or it would happen when we turned on the lights in certain rooms. We installed a motion detector by the back door, but it never once went off for anyone other than us. The parking lot was pretty poorly lit, and so was the wooded area out back, so I put the brightest bulbs I could out by the back door. I came out one morning to find the light bulbs smashed and the metal light covers missing. We eventually found them out a few feet into the woods, smashed, like someone had stomped on them. Every light bulb we put out after that got smashed. I had to walk home from work because none of us had cars and spotted the shadow of a male figure standing by the identical building across from ours. When they noticed I had spotted them, they took off running. This happened several more times to my boyfriend and roommate, where they would see the shape of someone out back, and that person would take off running behind the garages or into the woods when spotted. I woke up pretty early one morning, when it was still dark, to work on homework, and saw a light coming through the living room window, like someone was trying to see through the slots on the blinds with a flashlight, which we thankfully had curtains to block. Everything came to a head one night when Ryan and I decided to run to Walmart with a friend. Alice had a really ridiculous habit of drinking while she was cleaning the apartment and leaving the back door open because she didn't like the smell of the cleaning products. I had asked her numerous times not to do this, obviously because of all the issues we had been having, so she said she wouldn't. We got to Walmart, and I'm standing in the hair color aisle, and I start getting all these frantic texts from Alice telling me to call her. I called her, and she was hysterical and said, "2 guys just tried to come in here. You need to come home now. The police are on their way." Apparently she had opened the door as soon as we had left, even though I had told her she absolutely needed to leave it locked, and 2 guys had walked in through the screen door. She had apparently screamed at the top of her lungs and covered her face, and when she looked up, they were gone. She was pretty drunk by that point, and I strongly suspected she was also high from mixing it with her medication. The police were there by the time we got back, and I watched with my heart completely sinking as the officer made disbelieving looks at her while she gave a description of the 2 guys. She was absolutely hysterical by that point, and clearly under the influence, so she kept getting tripped up by questions the police asked and changed her answers. What we got out of it was that they were 2 white guys, one taller and blonde, and the other slightly shorter, but pale with dark black hair. Ryan's friend, who had been at Walmart with us, said that the description fit 2 guys who had walked into the restaurant that he and Ryan worked at a couple of weeks prior. He said the guys walked in, looked around, and tried to see who was in the kitchen area, and then left. He only remembered it because of how suspiciously they were behaving, but he didn't have a whole lot of details on them either. I moved out shortly after that. Ryan left to go to a different college. We broke up, and I didn't want to stick around alone in the place where I felt like my life was constantly in danger. I also didn't want to live with someone who wasn't going to take home security seriously, and advised Alice to also move. My best guess at this point is that these 2 guys lived in one of the surrounding buildings because of how they were able to disappear and reappear so suddenly, but also in such spaced out intervals. It's only conjecture, but I think that because I must have personally seen Alice bring around 30 guys back to the apartment in the time I lived there. One of them might have been someone she met at a bar, or someone who might have watched everything that went on in her room and developed an obsession. I can't prove any of that, and it bothers me endlessly that I don't have an answer. We were never able to even get close to catching them because of the layout of the apartment building, and because their attacks, quote unquote, were so random. I live in the same town still, and the sight of those woods in my old apartment building still give me goosebumps. I never got to find out who they were or what they wanted, and that bothers me to no end. It brought chills to my bones just recounting everything, and I don't think I've ever truly felt safe being home alone since this happened. I have always been good friends with one of my cousins, Cole, who's the same age as I am. The two of us were not quite inseparable, but we always did get along very well together, and were often found together, both in school and outside of it. When we were 12 and in the 6th grade, I was hanging out with Cole on a Friday afternoon around the later part of May, and we were psyched at the start of the weekend. We had wound up at his house since we didn't live too far from me, and at one point my mom called to say that our grandpa was in the hospital. While the issue with our grandpa wasn't expected to be life-threatening, he was being kept at the hospital overnight for observation, and both my parents and Cole's were planning on staying with him and grandma at the hospital. I was told that I was given the okay to stay at Cole's house for the night, with Cole's 15-year-old brother Hunter being in charge while our parents were out. This was fine by us. I got along well enough with Hunter, and he was never the bossy older brother/cousin that some of my other friends said they had to put up with. We ordered out for pizza and enjoyed goofing off as boys that age tend to do. At around 9 or so, there was a knock at the front door, and Cole went to answer it. I was a bit curious as to who it could be at that time of the night, and so I watched from a ways back. At the door were two older guys. They said that they were with the city and that they were investigating reports about the water pressure supposedly being bad in the neighborhood. They asked Cole if his parents were home, and when Cole said they were unavailable at that moment, the guys started asking a bunch of questions about how the water pressure was in the house and if they could come inside to check. Hunter came over at that point and politely told the guys that the water pressure was fine and perhaps they should just move on to check on other homes in the neighborhood. The guys seemed reluctant to leave, but turned and walked away after Hunter started closing the door. After the door was shut, we looked at each other and shrugged, but didn't think too much of it after that, and went back to goofing off. Eventually, we decided to go to bed. Cole and Hunter shared a bedroom, and we all agreed that I would sleep in there with them, rather than me hitting the sack on the couch or something like that, so that we could talk while we fell asleep. And Hunter grabbed a sleeping bag out of their camping supplies for me. When we got into their bedroom, they stripped down to their briefs, and I remembered Cole had mentioned to me once a while back that they had started sleeping in just their underwear. Since I hadn't originally planned on staying the night, I hadn't brought anything with me from home as far as overnight stuff. But since I wasn't in the mood to sleep in my clothes, I stripped down to my briefs as well, though I felt a bit embarrassed, even though we were all guys there, and I knew they wouldn't say anything or be judgmental. They climbed into their beds and I quickly crawled into the sleeping bag, and after talking for a while about random stuff, we eventually fell asleep. Early the next morning, I got up because I had to pee, and so I quietly got out of the sleeping bag and went and did my business in the bathroom. On the way back to the bedroom, I heard something in the family room, which was on the opposite end of the house from the bedrooms and the particular bathroom I was using. I didn't pay too much attention to it at the time, thinking it must be either Cole or Hunter, until I got back into the bedroom and realized that both of them were still in there. Trying not to panic, I woke them and told them that I thought someone was in the house. They quietly followed me, and the moment we walked into the family room, we saw the two guys from the night before in there, and it was rather clear they were robbing the place. One of them started moving towards us as he pulled out a wicked-looking knife. The three of us promptly raced to the front door, somehow managed to get it unlocked and open, and we fled outside. As luck would have it, a cop was driving by at that particular moment. We quickly flagged him down and told him about the two guys in the house. The cop called for backup, and within a couple of minutes, several other cops were there, and they proceeded to enter the house. And after some searching, they caught the two guys. The cops figured out that the two guys must have entered from a window in the laundry room that had a broken latch and had probably targeted that house because, while it wasn't empty, they had probably realized that there were no adults there and figured that if we discovered them, we could be more easily dealt with than adults. To add insult to injury, while we were waiting outside while the cops searched the house, some of the neighbors came out to see what the commotion was about, and this included some kids who went to the same school as Cole and me, including a few who were in the 6th grade class with us. It was during that time that the three of us realized that we had never had the chance to get dressed, so, just like in the stereotypical nightmare, we had to stand outside in full view of everyone in just our briefs for what seemed like forever before being allowed back inside. When we went back to school on Monday, Cole and I had to put up with more than a bit of snickering, stares, and ribbing for the next few weeks until school ended for the summer. This happened about 2 years into our now almost 9-year relationship, and it still gives me chills when I think about it. My partner Ron and I had just pulled up to his mom's house after a date night, and we were in the middle of saying our goodbyes. His mom's house used to be in a quiet, residential area surrounded by busy main streets and a random freeway entrance 2 blocks over. We were not parked more than 5 minutes when a man coming from the house next door came up to the car with a flashlight, tapping on the passenger window, motioning for us to lower it. Needless to say, we were both a little freaked out as he appeared out of nowhere and refused to lower the window, especially considering we did not recognize him. He tapped harder this time, and Ron told me to just drive around the block until he went away. So I drove down to the end of the street to put some distance between us and the man. That's when we see him jump into a car and drive full speed towards us. Panicked, I make a wide right turn onto the main street so that I am in the left lane. The dude does the same, except pulled into the lane on our left in the middle of oncoming traffic. At this point, I am hysterical, and Ron and I are trying to rationalize what is happening. When I catch a glimpse of his face, he seemed so angry, and I realize he's screaming something at us, but I can't make it out. So I make a jerk maneuver in front of the car to my right to dart down to the next residential street. We thought we had lost him, but he came flying down behind us only to pull up on our left again, screaming at us to get out of the car. While this is happening, Ron has the police on the phone trying to give them details about the car and the man driving. I, on the other hand, step hard on the brake and reversed it all the way back down the block to get away from the man. He must not have seen it coming because he seemed to stall for a minute. We were hoping that was the end of it, but he chased us down that street too. I realize the freeway entrance is only a block over now, so I hightail it, running a red light in the process, and pull onto the freeway at the last minute. In the rearview mirror, we see him stop abruptly and stare at us while we zoomed down the freeway. With the police on the phone, they explain that they'll send out a patrol to scope out the area for a car of that description. Not sure if that ever happened. I drive until I was sure he wasn't following us and we were far enough away from Ron's mom's house to call my parents. We pulled into a Rite Aid parking lot and waited for them to come get us while I am just crying hysterically. That night, my stepdad drove Ron back to his mom's house where they saw no sign of the man. The next day, when Ron had told his family what happened, they went next door to confront the neighbor about it, only for the neighbor to explain that they had no company over that night, did not recognize the car, and did not know anyone of that description. So, this happened to me and my best friend when we were in high school. We live in the lovely state of Hawaii, and we would often go to the beach a short walk from my house when she would stay over. To give a brief description of us, we are both fairly skinned females, blondish, brown hair, and have light-colored eyes. We both look pretty similar except she has corkscrew curls. People would ask us if we were sisters while we were growing up. This is slightly important for later on in the story. A good portion of where I grew up was good old Iwa Beach, deep into Iwa, like Hua Bush. If anyone knows where that is or has heard of it, you know where I'm talking about. For the rest, it's an area where homeless, druggies tend to hang out, and the beach is actually quite rocky. If you head up the beach though, there's less rocks and less people. That nicer area of the beach is the part that's closer to my house, and where we usually would go. Kind of like a secret beach location, but not really if you lived in that particular area. So one weekend, my friend, let's name her Jessica, and I were hanging out at my house. We decided to go hang out at the beach and tan, do whatever. This particular day though, we had decided that instead of walking to the slightly less rocky beach, we would go to the secret beach near White Plains. No rocks, not too many people, nicer waves, more beach. It was about a 10 to 15 minute drive, and we thought, what the hell, why not? We get to the beach, there's not a lot of people, it's a lovely day, and we put our stuff down and just start chilling. Then, it happens. Jessica and I had been there maybe all of 20 minutes, when we were approached by a man that was maybe about 30 to 40 years older, average build, dark hair, and a bit of facial hair if I remember correctly. There was nothing about him at first to give us any creepy vibes. We could tell he was local, and it's uncommon for strangers to come up to each other at the beach and talk story or ask something, so we thought nothing of it when the man introduced himself as Dave. However, after his polite intro, he then proceeded to tell us that he was a journalist/reporter for a well-known local newspaper, and he was doing an article about tourists and their thoughts on less-known beaches. Jessica and I immediately gave each other that side look like, something isn't right here. That sentence alone made us suspicious for a couple reasons. One, he had no camera, notebook, pen, or anything to indicate he was taking notes for his story. He was also just wearing swim trunks, not really professional appearance. Two, there was a report on the news around that time that young girls were being conned into modeling agencies and being approached by men on beaches, or the mall, anywhere where tourists or locals were known to frequent, and being kidnapped into human trafficking. 3. He had not given us any proof that he in fact worked at said newspaper, or that his name really was Dave, like a business card. Because of this, we decided we weren't going to trust anything this guy said. I would also like to note that while we were in a secret spot, it wasn't a spot that a lot of tourists really know about or even go to. They like to go to the beaches near their hotels or the ones they have read about or heard about, and wouldn't drive all the way there. Really, it's where locals hang out. This is kind of where our descriptions come into play, because I was born and raised there, even if I didn't look like it, and so was Jessica. It would be pretty easy to mistake us for dumb tourists. Anyway, so Dave says he's writing this story, right? He then asks us what our names are, and starting to look at Jessica and I up and down, almost like he's memorizing what we look like and sizing us up. Never in my life have I ever gotten such major stranger danger vibes from a guy, and proceed to give him some fake name off the top of my head. Jessica follows suit. This is where it starts to get even creepier and uncomfortable. After a brief pause and more intense staring, Dave proceeds to say, "Well, are you girls hungry? I got food in my barbecue at my van if you wanted to hang out." Yes, this dude said van, and points to his green-colored kidnapper van. Instantly, the red flags are flapping in the hurricane-like winds of our instincts. Why in the world would two 15, 16-year-old girls want to hang out with a middle-aged man? It was almost like the teen version of asking you if you wanted candy. You just had to hop into the van. Dave wasn't even asking us questions about the beach and how we had heard about it. In fact, it was like he completely forgot the reason why he was there and just really wanted us to go to his van with him. We told him we were okay, and thanks for the offer, hoping he would leave us alone. Dave wasn't going to take no for an answer. He kind of got a look on his face like he was surprised that we had turned him down, and then got more forceful. "Are you sure? I got chicken and some drinks. It'll be fun," he said. hoping that we would cave if he kept being persistent. Again, we told him no, and he decided to leave us alone for now, only to walk to his van, sit and watch us lying on the beach. It was really unsettling to have him stare at us like that, like he was waiting to see what we would do. More so because we were two young girls in bikinis by ourselves in a somewhat closed-off beach. There was a group of guys that wasn't too far from us, military guys, pretty easy to tell, and Jessica and I decided to go and talk to them. Plus, we felt a little safer knowing that we weren't alone on the beach with this guy. So we walked up to the group and asked them if Dave had come over to them and had asked them any questions regarding his story. The guys looked at us, then looked at Dave, and said that he hadn't approached them at all, and that they had been on the beach for a while before us. Jessica and I took this as a sign that it was time to pack up and go home. Dave was still watching us. He had seen our interaction with the guys, as we came back and gathered up our things and walked off towards my truck. We didn't immediately walk straight to my truck, and we kind of walked past it to see if Dave had packed up his stuff to start following us. I was parked along the road and had the trees blocking the beach on one side, so if anyone decided they wanted to snatch you up off the road, you couldn't see it from the beach. Luckily, we didn't see him, and we left. Checking my rearview mirror in case I saw that suspicious van follow us on the way back to my house. On the way back, Jessica had asked me if I had gotten that gut feeling the same time he had said he was working for the newspaper. I said I did, and we both told each other the same exact things that made us feel that way. It was almost like we had read each other's minds and was seeing the exact same thing. Really eerie. I think what made the experience all the more unnerving was that he seemed to be looking for specific targets. He hadn't asked the guys anything, so he was definitely looking for girls. Who knows? Maybe he could have been a human trafficker and was trying to get either one or both of us into that van. I have never been back to that particular area of White Plains since. I almost wonder what would have happened if that group of guys wasn't there, or if we hadn't listened to our gut. For clarification, I am a male, and this happened in my early 20s. Before I start, I need to provide a little backstory. I grew up in a very sheltered life, usually only leaving the house for grocery runs and doctor appointments. I didn't even go to school. My mother decided it was best to homeschool me. I was, and still am, very socially awkward as a result of my upbringing, though I am getting better. One thing I did leave the house for as a child was to compete in talent competitions. I was a pianist and still am, though a little rusty. I had a newspaper article published for me once to advertise a fundraising concert I was holding at my local church. I needed funds to go to a competition 1,500 miles away. In the article, the journalist recorded a quote from me. She had asked what I thought of my talent, and being a child in a Christian house, I replied, "It's not my talent. God let me borrow it." Fast forward till I became an adult. I was eager to leave the house and to get out on my own. I decided to get my commercial driver's license so I could get out and see as much of the world as I could. Besides driving long hours and the occasional night of having trouble finding a halfway decent place to park at the end of the day, I enjoyed it. One night, I was pulling into a truck stop to park for the night. As I was taking my dog out to do his business, I passed by the truck next to mine. It had its driver's side window down, and the driver was sitting in the driver's seat. He called out to me as I passed him, complimenting that he liked my dog, and asked if he was friendly. I thanked him and informed him that my dog was shy for strangers. Being that I sat in a truck all day with no human interaction, besides the occasional honk and guy flipping me off for being slow, I longed for conversation and told him I would be right back. A few minutes later, after putting my dog in my truck, I walked over to talk to my parking spot neighbor. We chatted for a while, him in his chair, and I standing on the top step on the side of his truck. After about 20 minutes, He asked me if I noticed that his arm had bumped mine 7 times. My arm was on top of his armrest as I clung to the side of his truck. This surprised me. I had not noticed it at all. Thinking back on it, I believe he was testing to see how situationally aware I was. I told him I had not noticed. It was cold outside, considering it was the middle of winter, so he invited me to sit in his truck to continue our conversation. This is where I should have had alarm bells ringing in my head, but growing up so sheltered, I was too trusting of people. I entered his truck. We continued to talk, though the conversation started crossing lines, asking questions that were too personal. He was asking me stuff like, "What's your phone number? Who are your parents? What was your grandparents' full names? Where do you live?" etc. Regretfully, I answered him. Thankfully, I had the sense to at least not give him my address. We had also swapped seats during the conversation. First, he had moved to the passenger seat, so I could sit in the driver's seat. But then, we swapped to where I was in the passenger seat, and he was in the driver's seat. The conversation started to take a weird and creepy turn. After all those questions, he asked, "Did you notice that my eyes don't have any color?" His irises were black, just 2 black orbs surrounded by the white of his eyes. I later looked this up on Google. There is apparently a rare condition that causes someone's eyes to be so dark brown that they appear black. This is where I started to feel very uneasy. He started talking about my childhood, and this is where he said something that disturbed me the most. He asked, "Didn't you have a talent as a kid?" I said yes, and that I played the piano. He replied, "Wouldn't that be a lie, since you only borrowed it?" I had not mentioned to him anything about that article, and the city it was from was too small to be noticed by someone that lived so far away. He lived like 2,000 miles away from my hometown. I was ready to get out of there. I was trying to think of how to excuse myself without rousing suspicion. He started trying to convince me to ride with him to his next delivery and to just leave my truck where it was, that he would bring me back the next day. I declined. He then asked if I would come visit him at his home. Again, I declined. It had been several hours, so I decided to tell him that I needed to take my dog out to do his business again, so he didn't go in my truck. I exited his truck and took my dog out again, but this time when my dog was done, I went back in my truck and locked the doors. I also tilted both seats forward, so it would be difficult for him if he entered my truck, buying me time if needed. The next morning, he was gone. I continued on my day, relieved that I was away from him. A few hours later, he called me. "So why did you tilt your seats forward last night?" I told him it was to keep my dog from jumping on them. He continued to talk to me, though I kept my answers short this time. I blocked his number after he hung up, and later decided to change my phone number. I know I was lucky that it didn't go farther than a creepy conversation. I am more careful now about who I talk to and where I am. Be careful, everyone. Never get into a stranger's vehicle, no matter how friendly and innocent they seem. I have learned my lesson. In April of last year, my boyfriend and I were coming home from our friend's house. I had just finished my first year at college, and we wanted to go out and celebrate and have some fun. We live in a rural town, and our friend lived on the far side of it, so our walk was about a half hour or so. I had a drink or two, and smoked some of the joint they had rolled. Smoking makes me paranoid, and this night was no different. Anyway, we left at maybe 10 or 11 p.m., and everything was perfectly normal until we got to the end of the long street that would eventually lead to my house. This street always feels so long to walk, like hours can pass and you barely make a dent in the amount of steps made. The street we turned onto this road was maybe 10 blocks from my house. A few minutes after we turned onto this road, I felt like something was off, but my boyfriend said that I was stoned, and reminded me that I'm a pretty paranoid person to begin with. I really am. This white pickup truck that was parked in front of some house turns on and begins to drive slowly away and would then park. I watched it to see if it was just me being paranoid or not, but it proceeded to stop a couple of houses down and sat there with the car still on. As soon as we would get close, it would drive away, parking a little further away. This continued until we got to the end of my street. At this point, I kept telling my boyfriend that I am not paranoid, that this truck was following us, and he had gone quiet. A couple houses down from mine, this truck drives to the end of the street, my house on the corner. There's a dead end right by my house because we live near a river. The truck stops for a moment at the dead end and proceeds to turn on their high beams and begin to slowly drive towards us. My boyfriend sticks his arm out in front of me, stopping me from walking any further as this truck continues to approach. My house is so close, yet so far. This truck slowly drives by us. The windows are tinted, but we can see two silhouettes. And because they had blinded us, we didn't think to look at the license plates or even the model of the truck. I swear, I felt like that was the night I was going to die. My thoughts hurled around in my mind, and I could see that my boyfriend was in the same mindset. My boyfriend, being pretty quick on his feet, waited until the truck disappeared from sight and took my hand before racing to my house and locking the door. He had thought about turning down one of the other streets so that we could try to lose them, but he figured he would wait until they were out of sight to book it to my house so they wouldn't see which house we went in. We looked out one of the front windows very carefully and saw this truck come back into view and began to drive around the block, presumably looking for us. This went on for 10 minutes. I called the police to inform them that we had been followed, but without the license plates or model, they could only keep their eyes open for suspicious white trucks. I was adamant that these people had to know one of us, if not me, because they drove until they were beside my house. Whether they actually knew it was my house or not, I don't know. My boyfriend tries to insist that it was probably a bunch of kids trying to mess with us, but I don't believe that. A few days later, we heard that someone was picked up and was last seen in a white truck. Since this night, there have been stories in the paper and online that people have been grabbing people and these people were trafficked in the area. I am still seeing reports even today which prompted this unsettling memory. It makes me wonder if they were some of these people, and if they were they after both of us or just one of us? Or were they truly just a bunch of jerks trying to mess with us? Either way, I don't care to know. Whenever I see a white truck, I become on edge. It may be silly, but the events of that night are still fresh in my mind, years later.